Hi folks, the Filipino P here. And most of you that watch my channel want to understand my culture. Probably because you're planning to visit or move here, or because you already live here and just need a good laugh about all the wackiness going on around you. And since my videos on cultural differences are so popular, it's time for yet another one. So just sit back and marvel at all the silly, ridiculous, frustrating, and charming things that make the Philippines a place to call home. Okay, the first one might surprise you. Many Filipinos don't name their pets. Yep, even if it follows them on walks and eats dinner at their home. A lot of Filipinos don't bother giving Rover a name. This is especially true with poor Filipinos, who are often pet owners but not pet lovers. Animals often get treated more like useful tools such as security systems rather than loyal friends or members of the family. Those with thoroughbred animals, often richer Filipinos, do tend to give them names, but poor families rarely spay or neuter their animals, which can breed unchecked. Some families have so many dogs and cats that there's no way to even recognize them, much less give them individual names. This might also explain why some Filipinos don't even think twice when stuffing a bag full of unwanted kittens and throwing it into the road. I'll be doing a video on that, coming up soon. But instead of giving them a name, we say, "Hey dog," or "Hey cat." Or sometimes we just make sounds to call them. So if you hear someone say, "Puss, puss, 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 puss," don't assume they've developed a case of stuttering Tourette's. They're just trying to get Fluffy's attention. Now I know this next one really ticks some of you guys off. And while you certainly have the right to react however you want, I would only ask that you take it in the spirit in which it was said. Most of you that have wandered the streets of the Philippines have at one time or another heard a voice shout, "Hey Joe," and look up to see someone smiling and waving at you, usually a kid or a teenager. This seems to anger some of you, but it's not meant as an insult. We're just trying to be friendly and test out our English. And "Hey Joe" is sometimes all we know, especially as kids. But why Joe? Well, it's a nickname that comes from World War II and refers to G.I. Joe, when almost every single foreigner was an American soldier fighting the Japanese. That's also why all foreigners, regardless of their nationality, are often referred to as Americans, which really upsets some of you foreigners from other countries, despite the fact that we really like Americans here. So it's definitely not an insult. And of course, we can't tell your nationality just by looking as you drive past. So we call out, "Hey Joe," in the hopes that you'll notice us and return the wave. No offense intended. If we knew it upset you, we wouldn't do it. Quite as often, probably. And now for you lovers of dessert. The good news is, Filipinos like everything sweet. The bad news is, Filipinos like everything sweet, including spaghetti, drinks, ketchup, and even shrimp sauce. Believe it or not, I was served sweet pad thai last night, and it was so nasty I couldn't even eat it. Filipinos are obsessed with sweet drinks too. If you ask for orange juice, chances are you'll get tang. We're not big on actual juice here, but artificially flavored sugar water is present on almost every table. I'm not sure how it got like this, but I'm afraid it's contributing to a national trend towards obesity. And Filipinos better watch out, because when we indulge in too much of the wrong food, we have a tendency to look like Oompa Loompas. And no one wants that. So now let's talk about feminine hygiene. If you're a Western woman planning to travel to the Philippines, just remember that it's BYOT. Bring your own tampons. Filipinos use pads almost exclusively. And if you're looking for tampons, you might be out of luck. In fact, The employees at most stores won't have any idea what you're talking about, even with a hand gesture demonstration. But given that a majority of Western women use tampons, why the big difference in preferences? Well, the reason is gonna sound silly, but welcome to the Philippines. It's believed that if a woman uses a tampon, she loses her virginity. That's right, folks. A woman can give it up to a tube of cotton. So when a woman takes the plunge and buys a tampon, she's announcing to everyone in the store that she's no longer a virgin. But please, resist the obvious temptation to shout, "You harlot!" the next time you see a young woman buying tampons. I'm sure she's already well aware of her debauchery. There's a real stigma here against putting foreign objects in your body. Unless, of course, it's a foreigner's object in your body, then it's perfectly acceptable. One thing you'll notice when you come to the Philippines is that there are so many people here. If you don't like crowds, this is not the place to be, especially in the city. Roads are crowded, stores are jammed, sidewalks are often choked with pedestrians, and it can be hard to find a spot where you're not surrounded by other people. The Philippines only has 1/33 of the landmass of the US, but almost 1/3 of its population. So if you want to imagine just how crowded it is, every time you see one person in your country, imagine adding 9 more. And now, imagine that all of them are making as much noise as they can. Add to that about 12 million stray animals, and you have a pretty good idea of the population density here. So watch your step. And as for making noise, there are 2 sounds in particular that you're gonna hear over and over and over until it drives you nuts. Now you probably think I'm gonna say something like roosters and motorbikes, but the sounds I'm talking about are far more insidious because they've crept into almost every TV show, news broadcast, advertisement, radio program, and even YouTube video. I'm talking about this and this. And if you live in the Philippines, you'll hear them with such annoying regularity that you'll wonder why someone doesn't come up with different sound effects. When they were introduced years ago, they were cute and funny. But these days, they're so overused that I'm amazed people aren't voluntarily popping out their own eardrums just to avoid hearing them again. But whether they still make you smile or make you cringe, I have a feeling these sound effects are here to stay. And now let's have some fun with word meanings and the way they're used differently here. In the West, the word scandal refers to an action that's morally or legally wrong and causes public outrage. But to us, the word scandal has a very specific definition: a leaked sex tape. So if you ever accuse a Filipino of scandalous behavior, just watch how fast they grab their phones to see if they made a guest appearance on Pornhub. And if a Filipino looks at you and says, "Madapaka," you might think they just called you a name that appears on George Carlin's list of 7 dirty words. But in actuality, they're just telling you to be careful not to stumble. And be really careful with this one, especially where Bisaya is spoken, because one little mispronunciation could land you in a lot of hot water and get you some nasty looks. Lolo is the word for grandfather, but the word lolo refers to an activity that your mother said would make you go blind. So if you accidentally confuse the two when meeting your Filipino's grandpappy, no matter whether it's taken as an insult, request, or an invitation, you probably won't be a welcome guest at any more family get-togethers, which might be a blessing in disguise. And finally, let me put to rest the rumors about the behavior that causes a lot of confusion when you foreigners see it take place. Have you ever been walking through the mall and noticed 2 girls holding hands, and then another couple, and then another? And right after that, you see 2 boys walking along with their arms around each other. You probably drew the obvious conclusion. But then wonder how there can be so many babies born here if everyone prefers their own gender. Well, rest assured that what you think you saw is not what's going on. Whether they're male or female, it's perfectly acceptable in my culture to hold hands or walk arm in arm with a friend of the same sex. What appears gay to you doesn't raise an eyebrow here. It's far more likely that a young couple of different genders hanging all over each other would be guilty of scandalous behavior. Well, that's it for today's episode. And I'll be back on Friday on location in Manila with an interview that might shock you, offend you, or make you think. Just the way I like it. Till next time, folks. A few videos ago, I was addressing the questions some of you folks had about Filipinos, and one question in particular regarding our nocturnal habits got a lot of responses. I mentioned that a surprising number of Filipinos like to hold a man's wood while he sleeps, and so many of you confirmed it, that the phenomenon deserves its own name, lumberjacking. But the question still remains as to why we become such tree huggers when the sun goes down. The prevailing theory seems to be that it's all about guarding the twig and berries and protecting the trunk of a man's junk from other hungry beavers that might like to munch on that wood. But to be sure, formal studies need to be conducted in a controlled environment. Only then can we answer the more difficult questions, such as how long it takes her to search for the birch. Does she remain motionless during the ritual? Or does the oak get a stroke? Is there juice from the spruce? Until this research is completed, these mysteries will remain unknown. So I encourage you to apply in person to my testing facility, where clinical trials have already begun. I appreciate your assistance, because the next lumber that's jacked might be your own. If you think about it, I'm kind of like your stewardess, making sure you stay in an upright position during the video and guiding you to the exits. The exits of all your worries about life in the Philippines. The captain has asked that you please give a thumbs up on this video and subscribe to this channel. And for your entertainment, we have a selection of other in-flight movies for you to enjoy. In the case of an emergency landing, place your head between your knees and kiss your ass goodbye. Have a nice flight!